Welcome back to the Grappling Growth Podcast with me, Joe Testoy. On episode 48, I had the pleasure of welcoming up Jack Gaisford. Jack and I have been connected for a couple of years on LinkedIn, and I must say, hands down, he has some of the best content on LinkedIn. He shows up pretty much every day, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. About 2 or so years ago, Jack tore down his 10-person, pretty successful marketing agency to then reassess his life and focus on what mattered to him, health, happiness. He then and is now the founder of the Content Club. But that part just scratches the surface. Jack gets really, really deep on this podcast. He talks about stuff that's happened within his family, his grandfather being in a home. He talks very openly about suicide that is close to him and essentially how that has allowed him and been the good in everything to reassess everything that he cares about, which is relationships with his family, going to the gym, his health, and really what advice he'd give to a 20-year-old who is looking to create their own path throughout life. I'd recommend listening to this podcast if you're someone who is at a bit of a crossroads or you feel you've gone down a door that feels as though it's closed when in reality it's probably a revolving door. Hope you enjoyed this podcast, and if you do, then share it to a friend. Maybe they'll find it beneficial. Thanks for listening.
As entrepreneurs, we all experience challenges in our business journey. I'm Joe Testoy, and the Grappling Growth Podcast is my attempt at documenting my entrepreneurial journey while building my brands. I sit down with fellow entrepreneurs, understanding how they grapple with growth. I hope you find value and enjoy.
Jack, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Yeah, good, man. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
You're most welcome. Jack, I'm always curious to get people's take on this question. What does growth look like to you?
Oh my God, you started off with a really deep one straight away. Growth to me looks like, I think, self-development, self-awareness, and constant improvement. I think if you're not getting better, even 1% every day, I think it's a lost opportunity for growth. I'm a big believer in trying to always one up yourself, trying to have a better day than you had yesterday. Yeah, that's what growth means to me, mate. I think just constantly developing, becoming a little bit more self-aware of who you are and what you do and what you're great at, what you're weak at, your strengths and weaknesses, and kind of just continuing the wild ride that is life, I guess. Yeah.
And I know for you last year it was a year of kind of rebuilding. You started the Content Club up, but a tangent that I think a lot of entrepreneurs get into, maybe in their late 20s, so to speak, is they take a big emphasis on fitness. And I remember reading one of your posts on LinkedIn that you said that you pretty much just started slacking off in the gym. You didn't prioritize it, but then it was a case of that. So kind of talk to me about the pillars in life right now that are really, really important to you, that you're really focusing on that growth.
You've probably hit it on the head there, mate. I think for me, it's family time. I think is a big one. I think I spent my entire 20s. I'm 28 now for perspective. I spent the last 6, 7, 8 years building an agency, growing a team, really that like hustle culture, early starts, really late finishes. And I think that caused a lot of problems with not necessarily family life. I'm very fortunate and very privileged to have a partner that totally accepts the way of life of entrepreneurs and starting a business and the hustle that you have to go through. But I think it kind of just it was too long. It was 6, 7 years of doing the same thing every day, which is monotonous. It's incredibly dry. It's very uninspiring. And I think 2023, 2024 was the period where I kind of hit this point where I was like, right, I've really not let myself go, but I've definitely need to readjust what my priorities are kind of coming into my 30s soon. And for me, that's family time. I want to be there to eat dinner with my family at the end of the day. I want to go and take my dog for a big hike after work or whatever it might be. Fitness is another thing. In the gym at least 4 to 5 times a week. Trying to eat as healthy as I can. I feel like your business is only as good as you are. If you're feeling fatigued or tired or maybe not in the best emotional state, your business will suffer for that. And I think you need to be the best product that you can as a person. And also, I think to caveat all of that, just being a little bit more relaxed on those days where things don't go to plan and kind of just taking it on the chin and going, look, this hasn't been a massive cock up. The world's not going to explode. You've just had a bad day. Tuck it under the rug, get into a better shape of mind, hit the day tomorrow in even better mindset. So I think just not being as hard on myself as well. Spent my 20s just comparing and always trying to never celebrating the wins. I think is probably the nutshell there. Taking a moment to, I never really took a moment to just accept that I'd reached this milestone and that I should be proud of it. It was always, cool, I've hit it, and now I want something else, and now this seems really inferior. It feels really small. So yeah, health, fitness, family time, mental health, all those sorts of things. I think they're really key for me.
There was something really powerful that I read from Naval Ravikant a while ago, is that you've kind of got the golden trifecta, he calls it, is health, wealth, happiness. And at different stages in our lives that we've normally got two out of the three, and the golden trifecta is to have the three of them. So when we're young, we have happiness and health to an extent, but we don't have wealth. And then when we're old, we have wealth and happiness, but we don't have health. And it's about getting to that point in life where those three are there. And it's kind of like, I guess the best way to analogize it is you've got three rocks that you're pushing up a hill, and you can't just push that one up because the other two are just going to fall. So it's just juggling acts of pushing all three up at the same time. So I guess, and this is what I see amongst a lot of, I'm 29, I turn 30 next month. I see a lot of people, they reconsider what they're doing and why they're doing it. And I think kind of comes into that forefront idea of most people in the UK now that at this age, the thought is family, and they understand that happiness is something that really is valuable. And I think I'd be curious to get your take. Did you have this mindset at the age of, say, 18, 19, that you thought, I don't care about happiness, I'll compromise everything for money, hence why you really pushed to grow your business?
Definitely. I think, and that's, 100%. I think that's kind of what caused the inevitable burnout and, the whole realignment of what is my priority and what I appreciate in life and what I value. But also that changes with age. I'm sure that will also change then when I'm in my 40s and when I'm in my 50s and my kids have grown up and they've left home or whatever might happen, But yeah, definitely. I started my business when I was 21. I'd always kind of been entrepreneurial, even in my late teens, starting businesses. And I used to have a car detailing company that I used to go and wash people's cars for money and all this sort of stuff. And it was anything that I could just do to earn cash. I've always been very big on investing, trying to just build wealth over the long term. And I still am today.
Well,
But
what other businesses did you try before your agency?
so I had a company that still kind of runs today that I do if ever I just feel like I need a break from, well, it was when it was agency life, but not so much anymore, called Black Glove Detailing, which is a car detailing company, like a very sort of high-end luxury cars, Ferraris and McLarens and all that sort of stuff. And at the time I had a van that I would take to clients, and it was all kitted out with all the pressure washing stuff and everything. And it earned good money. The problem is it's so seasonal. And I think for me, it was one of those shiny things that took my eye off the ball for a little bit whilst I was building the agency. And I had really good fun with it. And then it started to get into the wet season. I thought, this is a real slog. I'm done with this now. I can't be bothered. Suck the whole thing in and just now sort of refocus on what I was doing originally. But throughout the last 10 years, I've always kind of had these periods where I've seen something shiny. I've gone all in on that. And I've kind of lost my eye on the ball and the main thing. So that's kind of a lesson. Maybe, I don't know if you've experienced it with other people, but I think just try and focus on what that main thing is, and just try not to take your eye off the ball. There will always be shinier things there. But yeah, for me, I've done a lot, mate. I'll be on a whole podcast for an hour if I told you what I've been doing since I was a kid. But
what was the kind of let's call it a side quest? What was the most out there side quest that you went for?
I used to do a most out there side quest. So considering that I'm a video guy, I used to try and build things like it was like photography templates and stuff, or like when you're editing files, you can use like .cube files to sort of have certain LUTs and stuff. At the time, I was a big fan of Peter McKinnon, and I saw that he made a huge multi-million selling like digital products and those sorts of things. I tried drop shipping before. I've tried starting an apparel brand before. Mate, I've done everything basically that you would do in your teens and your early 20s, but all brought me to here, mate. All brought me to agency life and then community. So, yeah.
You touched upon, and like the side quests are cool, but you touched upon something really nuanced and detailed where you said burnout. Can you go into what that looked like a little bit more?
Good question. I'll be as honest as I can as well with this, because I think that it's a very personal thing, but I think it's important for the story. So burnout for me, I reached the peak of burnout at the end of 2023. Obviously in the UK, we just had like the worst couple of years ever. Everyone was locked inside, and that didn't help anything. And then I think 2023, I kind of got to this point where I'd built my agency up to, I don't know, 9, 10 people. I can't remember at the time, doing pretty good revenue. And it just became a big mixture of managing people and trying to build culture. And it was everything outside of what I started the business to do. I started the business to make videos for cool people, and amazingly, unfortunately, again, we had the privilege of working with some huge brands. We did Xbox, and we did Microsoft, and we did Huel, and all these awesome, sick brands. But I just didn't really enjoy it. And I think at the time we had 9 or 10 people. I was getting in at, I would say, probably 6, half 6, 7 in the morning. I was staying until 10 p.m. at night, coming home, working until stupid hours. And I kind of just thought, what's the point? Staff are doing double my salary. They also then want pay rises, and I'm sitting here kind of sacrificing what I'm earning to build the business. For what reason? Just to have more clients, to then hire more staff to support those clients, to then get more clients to support those staff. And it kind of just became this big flywheel, like constant stepping stone game. And it was kind of like, where's the end goal there? I think because I didn't have clarity on what that direction looked like, I kind of just overworked, just completely fatigued myself to the point that I was missing the gym every week. I was eating terrible because I wouldn't have time to cook dinner, because I'd come back from work and just grab a Mackey's on the way home and just eat it in my car. And like not even things like not seeing family as much, like just can't be bothered to reply to texts at the end of a work day because it's just the least of my priorities right now. So relationships within the family got really tough, and I'm sure a lot of other people can relate to that, right? I think I hyper fixated on the business too much. I think that led me to go not necessarily a little bit crazy, but I think it felt like my whole world was my business. Mm-hmm. And I just reached this point where I just had enough of it. I burnt out massively. I lost all passion for the business, to the point that I ended up shutting the whole thing down. And it's, in hindsight, it sucks. 10 people lost their job on the same day. Everyone was fired. And the company is still a little bit in limbo in terms of what's happening with it, whether I'm exiting and someone's buying it, or whether we're going to sort of drop it or whatever. But it was the best decision that I have made, and now feeling much more positive, feeling much happier, focusing on fitness, focusing on family, focusing on friends, and generally it feels much more positive. But that's the dark side of agency life. And that's my experience. Not everyone who runs a business and who builds an agency will have that. I'm just saying from where I was and what I wanted out of life. I think it just took me down the wrong direction, probably due to a lack of experience. People who grow their businesses in their 20s, they don't have manager experience, and they don't have that life time. They don't have that life experience yet. So that's probably a little bit of all.
That's really insightful. And I think that's really helpful to a lot of people, including myself, because as we spoke before, I went through a similar experience with myself. I was running a nicely humble-sized agency, and I think it's one of those things that when you're young, you look at this glass building, you look at Canary Wharf, and that for me, that was my dream for a few years. It was, I want to work in Canary Wharf. So you see this, and you just see this magical skyline, but you never realise that what's going on inside is completely different to the aesthetics. At the end of the day, buildings look beautiful, but pretty much buildings inside look relatively the same, especially Canary Wharf. They were all built in the 1980s. So it's got 1980s carpets and architecture and concrete. And I think there's this law, there's this kid in us, this entrepreneurial kid that looks at everything and thinks, when we get here, everything will be final. But I'm curious, from the point of where you decided to sack all the team, which it's never nice to do that to people, especially as long as you're not narcissist. Some people will actually probably get joy out of that. How long before did you realize to yourself and say, this is it, I need to make this decision, before you pulled the trigger on that?
2 years, probably. 2 years, probably. I sat on that. I sat on that through COVID, through getting huge brands as clients. It just felt like I didn't have that. When you start a business, you're really excited and you've got that fire up your backside that really drives you to build something, build a legacy, and that at the time was what I wanted to leave as my legacy. I wanted to be this guy who built this really big production company, because whilst it is a very saturated industry, they're all very small, 3, 4, 5 staff. I wanted to build one that was 50 staff, 100 staff, that took over the world, right? And
why do you think that was important to you?
That's a good question. Probably slight ego, and that's me being 100% wearing my heart on my sleeve. I kind of wanted to prove to people that I could build something big, that I wasn't this young guy. I think it goes back to when I first started. So before I started my third agency, I used to work with my father, Mark, who had a recruitment business, and he sort of sold that, and he built a marketing agency, and that seemed to do okay.
I love your dad's content, by the way.
Yeah, he's cool, man. He's cool. And I think it was probably years of, well, not years, but, a period of time where I was often associated as, oh, you're Mark's son. And I think it was probably a bit of me going, fuck that. I want to be, your Mark's your dad. Flip it around a little bit.
Dad.
That's it. So there's probably a little bit of competitiveness there as well. And I wanted to kind of build something bigger, which I raised my hand up. I technically did, which is great. But no fulfillment came from that at all. That almost lost weight as soon as I started. It was then about, I've got to, figure it out. Yeah, it is 100%. But yeah, that's probably what caused it, to be honest. Yeah, a bit of friendly family competition, I would say.
Speaking of Naval Ravikant again, I've got his quotes recited more or less because I'm reading his book for the second time. But he said, I'm going to paraphrase this: Would you rather be known as the world's worst lover, but be the world's best lover, or be known as the world's best lover and actually be the world's worst lover? And essentially, the point is, it's about a status game. Are we doing things to say, oh, I'm bigger or I'm better than this guy? Or when you've got your own internal sorted, when you're waking up, and I think I came off LinkedIn for a little bit of period of time because I got into this toxic culture where I'd go on and all I'd hear is one guy say, oh, I had my best month ever in business, and another guy saying I've done this. And then I would be like, oh shit, well, I need to do this. And I just pulled away for a good about 6 months. I was very, very consistent. I remember coming on looking at guys like you, Sam Winsbury, other guys. And very honestly speaking, and there was loads, I'd be thinking, shit, I'm not doing enough. But when I looked at other things, I just think everyone is in their own journey. If we all thought we were the tortoise in the race, and we just thought we're just moving here, it's about consistency. It's not about being the rabbit where you run up here, you get distracted, you go here, and then you get back up. I think personally, what I've learned as I've grown older, and a big lesson I'm trying to take into my 30s is it's good to use other people as proxies and gauges, but it honestly doesn't matter. And all of these things are status games. At the end of the day, if like you are not paying my bills and I'm not paying your bills, so most of these things don't really matter. So to that point, Jack, what advice would you give to 20-year-old Jack? I
think it's hard because I can give advice, but that wouldn't be executed at 20 because I haven't got the life experience that I have now. So it falls on deaf ears. However, if it was actioned, I think it's about being self-aware, and I've said this kind of at the start. It's that kind of actualization that no matter what level you get to, there's always going to be someone that's done better. So you set these milestones that I guess are arbitrary in terms of I want to have a 50-person agency. You get to that point and you'll go, oh, but this guy's got a 100-person agency. There's I can't remember who it's from, but there's a graph, there's a picture, and it's a homeless guy who's looking at a man with a house, and he's going, oh, I want his house. And the guy with the house is looking at the guy with a yacht, who's going, I want his yacht. And the guy who's looking at the guy with a jet is saying, I want the guy with the jet. And it's just, no matter what level you have, you're always going to want something else. Or, there's always going to be someone that earns more money. You get to a billionaire. Well, okay, we'll try and get to a trillionaire. It doesn't stop. But I think the biggest thing is just find what makes you happy. What brings you purpose? What do you wake up every day and think, I can't wait to do this tomorrow, and that takes people decades to find out. Some people it will take them until they're 60. Colonel Sanders, KFC, he didn't start that till he was 53, 55, maybe even later, 65. I can't remember, but was he? But I mean, the point there is that some people don't find that until they're, you're getting up there in terms of age. Some people find that when they're 18 and they have their peak, but they plateau. I think everybody has their moment. And I think it's on you to try and figure out what you get real purpose and fulfillment and joy from. I think I know that sounds a bit cheesy, a bit like ooh, but I think it's true. But it's hard saying that to a 20-year-old who hasn't really started that journey yet. They have to. I had to go through the last 10 years to understand that it's not what I wanted. And if somebody had said to me, "Well, I've done it before and I hate it," I'd go, "Well, that's good for you, but I really want to build this." It's all relative. It's all subjective. But that's what I'd say.
I agree to everything that you say there. My sister's 18, my brother's 22, and anyone who I coach, I work with who's younger, I say that your 20s are quite exploratory. It's to learn and test and figure out what you want to do. Because when I was 18, I was, as I mentioned, Canary Wharf. I was obsessed. Probably it was in conjunction with Wolf of Wall Street. Came out 2013, and I remember I was like, oh, I just want to be a banker. Saw everything on there, kind of the facade. And then when that movie came out, I remember watched it with my friend. I snuck into the cinema with my friend to watch it. And we came out at 1:00 and we just looked at each other like, it's going to be us in 5 years. And then you start working towards it. And then you just realize that's nothing in line with what I want to do. And you see a lot of these guys who, especially bankers, back I guess, 80s, 90s, 2000s, the epitome of movies back then of like this fast life was bankers, and now it's probably tech guys. And I'm sure in 10 years' time, they're going to make movies about crypto guys. And the common theme is these guys see this massive boom in their life. Everything's going well. They've got everything. And it's a status game again. It's money, cars, women. And then what happens in these arcs of the movies is they get a little bit older. They realize that everything is soulless, that they're just waking up in the same position, but nothing makes them truly happy. I guess a pretty deep question, and you answer it however you want to answer it. It go as deep as you want. What would you say makes Jack happy right now?
That's a good one. I think it's one of those things I've never really fully dived into. I'm exploring so many different. I'm going from agency where I had no time to building a community where I still don't have a huge amount of time, but I have more time than I had before. And I think for me right now in my life, it's family. It's coming home at the end of the day and just being able to lean on someone that maybe doesn't necessarily understand all the intricacies about what the problems are, but is there just to listen and support. And I think just quality time with people that mean a lot to you, family, friends, partner, spouse, whatever it is. I think that's really important. I think you can have all the materialistic things. You can have nice watches and nice cars. And, I've had lots of those, which again, I'm very fortunate to be able to have had. But they definitely do not bring happiness. They bring a certain sense of proudness, and that's probably more of an inner proudness in terms of you accomplish something and you feel rewarded, and you've bared fruit from your labor that you can now enjoy, and nice holidays, or I don't know, maybe buy a fancy Tudor watch or whatever it might be. Right? There's definitely a sense that I think that fuels you on because you've experienced a taste of what you could have. But when you start getting that more and more and more, I had nice cars. I had a new car for every year for about 6 years,
What did you peak at? What car did you get to?
I had an MT, which was my sort of most recent one. And then I sold it all. So I sold all the cars. I earned some all right money on it because it was I won't bore you with all the details, but
Well, why
and
did
I
you
just
decide to sell them?
because it didn't bring long term happiness, and it just felt again like it was kind of I was always just trying to one up, and it wasn't to prove anything to anybody. It wasn't to show off. And I know a lot of people say, "Oh, you know, if you get this car, it's just because you're in midlife crisis and you just want to seem wealthy or whatever it is." That's not the case at all. I absolutely love cars. I live and breathe. I'm a massive petrol head. I track cars. I absolutely love it. I've got mates that track cars. It's not to show off. It was probably more to see what I could get and just always go bigger and bigger and bigger. But I just had this kind of epiphany moment where I just thought, if I just keep going and going and going, the cars are getting more and more powerful and they're getting nicer and nicer and nicer. Either they're going to get robbed, I'm going to get injured, or I'll end up killing myself on a motorway going 130 and just wrap myself around a pole, you know? It's also, you know, and this probably gets a little bit deep, but I've had friends who have been in their 20s who have kind of on paper have got everything that they wanted, right? And then they go into their 30s, and there was a year, I think it was 2023. I had 3 friends pass away, either due to suicide or due to stroke or a heart attack or something. Life just kind of dealt them a bit of a shit card. And it just really made me reflect on, okay, why am I building this? You know, and there was a really nice quote that I've just forgotten. I know it was something on the lines of, don't be so busy building a life that you forget to enjoy it. And I think that really hit home with me, where you can spend a decade, 2 decades building a business, and for some, they will absolutely do that and they will thrive, and they'll, you know, again, they'll enjoy the fruits of the labor at the end of it. But for some other people, you could get to the end of that, i.e. my granddad, for example, worked in oil. He earned millions and millions and millions. He was a director of a company called Emerald Hess, one of the biggest oil companies in the world. And now he's in healthcare, spending an absolute fortune in like a care home. And it kind of makes you think, you've worked your whole life to enjoy the money, and now the money that you have earned is supporting you and keeping you alive. What sort of life is that? You know, I know that's really deep, but I want to add that in there for people who, you know, will reflect on that, because it all comes down to being self-aware. If you are self-aware and you can understand and you have real drive and you know what you're building, absolutely fine. If you're just building it for the sake of building it, I don't personally see the point. That's my opinion.
Well, I mean, thank you so much for sharing that. And there's a very simple quote that I often try to live by, and it comes from Jocko Willink, and he says, "Good." He says, "Whatever situation happens is, look, death is the hardest thing to look at and say good about." And like, I'm really, really sorry to hear about your 3 friends, and equally your granddad. But all of these events has led to where you are now, and it's had you change your complete reflection point at probably what, the age of 26, 27. And it's so hard to look at that perspective and say, oh, well, these things are good. But the legacy of a lot of people, when they say what they want to pass on, is how can they make a change to the people around them? And where you're at right now, you've got the grace where you're at in life to say that everything that's happened has now formed what I want to do in the future. And you've completely reevaluated things. You've moved away from chasing status gains to, at the end of the day, the only things that really matter are ultimately our health above all else. And they say, when you have good health, you want 1,000 things. When you don't have good health, there's only one thing you want, is one thing. And for me, 2023, that was, honestly speaking, the hardest year of my life. And my health was in the gutter. I had a serious back injury where I couldn't even, let alone exercise, I couldn't walk, I couldn't run, I couldn't even sleep properly. I was waking up in the middle of the night just miserable, angry. And I think all of these reflection points, and my art for me is very, I don't want to say similar to yours, but it is to the point where I've looked at stuff and thought, what is the point of all of this when the fundamentals are, for most people, you want good health, touch wood, and then happiness around that. And there's relative wealth that you get to a point where some people will disagree with this and they'll say, fuck that, all I care about is money. And that's fine for some people. And I would say I'm pretty money motivated, but I know there's a certain level that you get to where the trade-off is not worth it, and you're compromising so much so. And I think it kind of comes back to the pushing 3 rocks up a hill analogy. Is if you just push one rock and the other 2 fall off, then what's it worth, really?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's each their own, right? It depends on what you want out of life. And again, granted, I'm on your level when you say that every bad situation, every bad card that's been dealt has very much brought me to where I am now in terms of my mindset and my perspective on life. And I think that is a wealth of knowledge that not everybody would have. I say privilege in a very loose term there, because it's not the opportunity to know at 28, but everything happens for a reason, right? There's absolutely nothing wrong with trying to just chase wealth. If you want to chase wealth and you want to get as rich as you possibly can, as fast as you possibly can, 100% go for it. If the motive there is larger, it's got to be. It can't just be arbitrary. It can't just be I want to have £1 million in my bank. It's more of a tactic to achieve something. £1 million to then do what with? To sit and to just that's it, or what's the goal with that money? I think there's got to be a direction. There's got to be a North Star. You've got to have clarity on what you're trying to do and what. I think it just comes down to purpose. If you wake up every day and you're going, I hate this job, I hate what I'm doing, I don't like it, just change. And I know it's so scary. And if you're in your 20s, you have the luxury of being able to do that. You can quit a job there and then. The fallback is if you have parents, then you can fall back, and I'm sure they'll let you move in or whatever happens. Again, it's all contextual. That's what my 20s were. We had, it was a typical family, mum, dad, sister, dog, me. And if my business has failed, but it doesn't really matter because I can move back home and I can take all the risk, Nowadays, totally different, Parents are divorced, sisters moved out, dog's not here. So it's a very different story. And then when you have kids, it's a very different story again, because you've got that pressure. What I'm trying to say there is just do what makes you happy. There is no right or wrong, and you will either win or you will learn in life. Okay. That's what I would say. Do you go and absolutely run at opportunities that you think are right in the moment. But usually with the power of hindsight, you realize that maybe something needs to be reprioritized a little bit. And that's where I was 23, 24.
And there's always things that you can look at and say, I wish, or I could have done so-and-so differently. I think the point you've made to summarize it is that most doors are revolving, and I think people think that they hit this door, there's a brick wall, they're stuck. But it's just a case of a lot of the time you turn around, you know probably, and that's why I asked you, how long before you pretty much closed down the agency did you then decide to close down the agency? And it's kind of the saying of hire slow, fire fast. I think as entrepreneurs, we're testament to the opposite of that, where we take a bit more time to do stuff. So we hire slow, and then we fire even slower. And I had that myself with my agency, where I essentially repivoted, and I just thought, oh man, if I literally did this 6-12 months ago, I would have had an extra 20-30K in the bank account. But again, it's only lessons that you learn. And
absolutely.
And one of the best things I think about entrepreneurship is you are really making up as you go along. But you know that 33-year-old Jack can turn around and look at 23-year-old Jack and say, no, I made that mistake here, or I could have done that better. And then you go back through and you realize that most things you can come back through, and most failure is not fatal. And I think the sooner we really adore to that, and we realize that, the easier things become, and we can just disattach from decisions. And also, you don't play this status game where someone turns around to you and they're like, or you care that someone says, oh, Jack, what a loser, he failed at this. You're like, bye-bye, mate, I don't give a shit. And that's how I try to view life right now.
Yeah,
Jack, I'm curious, onto kind of like a bit of a segue, but books, podcasts, what would between books and podcasts be your top 3 recommendations? Business-wise, let's say, business.
Oh, that's great. So anything that I read is just finance or business. It's not the opposite. It's just all very like analytical. That's the one. Sorry. Yeah. It's not fiction. It's all very non-fiction, very theory based.
Very similar to me.
Rich Dad Poor Dad. amazing, life-changing book for me, just on wealth and perspective and the long-term game.
I
Amazing
think
book.
that's the first book an 18-year-old should read.
Yeah, mate, I totally agree. So I've given it to my sister, my partner. They are reading it. I think it's an absolute classic, and it's good because it's packed with a really nice story as well. You know, it's not just theory. There's real lessons in there told in a really nice story arc. So that's a really powerful one. How to Win Friends and Influence People, I think, is a really great book. Again, another classic, just on the psychology of people and what makes people tick, and it's great from a networking perspective. It's a really great one. And I think I'm going to go with a generic one, but I'm also just going to tap on a fourth there. I would say Start With Why by Simon Sinek is an amazing book. Again, more on, again, kind of like building something with purpose. It's not just to earn money. There's got to be a motive there. There's got to be a North Star that you're focusing on. What is the why behind the business? I'm currently reading one as well. I'm going to put this on, called Your Next 5 Business Strategies, I think it's called, your next 5 business steps, something like that. I'm only halfway through it, but so far it's amazing.
Is that by Patrick Bet-David?
I think so, yes.
I think it's your next 5 moves.
Next 5 moves. It's something like that. But it's really good. It's really good. I'm only halfway through at the moment, so I can't fully recommend it, which is why it was a bolt-on. But I just think, like, yeah, there's a wealth of knowledge in those 4 books. The thing you have to do, you've got to read them and you've got to action them. You can get stuck in that reading trap and you just read and read and read and consume and consume and consume. You've just got to, I really limit what I read because I want to reflect and I want to try and action the things that I've learned in that book. But yeah, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it should be the first thing that you ever read, even before you start a business, even if you're 13, 14, you're just kind of starting to come into the world of, you know, getting your first job, because it's what the education system doesn't teach you. You know, it's about being financially literate. And I think every single person on the planet needs to have that information, regardless of whether you're an entrepreneur or you're an employee or whatever it is. You need to know how to manage your money. So, yeah, 3/4 books there, mate. Yeah.
You read The Psychology of Money?
Yes, I have. That is an amazing. So I read that on holiday in Greece. Incredible book. It kind of is on the same level to me as Rich Dad Poor Dad a little bit, but it dives into the whole stock market and everything as well. So it's very, very good.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned it. I think that for me is more like a modern day Rich Dad Poor Dad. He uses more, as in Robert Kiyosaki uses more examples of my Rich Dad versus my Poor Dad, and he told me how to do stuff. And I think one of the biggest things that I try to pass on to people about money, and I haven't mastered money, but I think the cool thing about being an entrepreneur is that generally most months you're starting at zero, and you might have monthly recurring revenue coming in, but you understand that you're not getting paid for your time, you're getting paid for the value you bring to businesses. Absolutely. And I think that's where a lot of people, that I've got a few friends who they've gone from a job to being a contractor where they earn maybe 50 to 100% more than what they would get in that job. And they think that's it. And they're like, oh, well, I don't know how to get out of what I'm doing. But if they went to their company, I'm just saying theoretically, most companies wouldn't agree to this, but if they said, I can get this project delivered to you in half the time, but I want to get paid the same, the company would say, well, yeah, that's great. That's what we want. We want speed of implementation. And then for them, they could turn around, I'm just saying this is like theory, they turn around and they offshore the work to a developing nation, and then they manage it. And then for them as a business mechanic, if they did that 3 times at the same time, well, they've got a business there. But I think that's where someone who looks at something, they can look at it completely differently from a divergent perspective, and then think of, how do I turn stuff into a business? And that's just kind of like a little fundamental arbitrage concept.
Yeah, people pay a premium if you can solve their problem faster, better, whatever. You know, really, as an entrepreneur, or you know, if just as a side hustle on your day job, you've got to figure out, you've got to find the gaps. And you've got to think what problems are this. What problem is X person in, and what solution can I offer to provide value? Depending on how you provide that solution and how you package that up, you could charge £1 or you could charge £1 million. You know, I will also say from experience that charging more of a premium for your service is so much easier to close clients than it is to charge cheap. It's just, I don't know why, it just is. I've gone from an agency that charges 50 grand, 100 grand plus for projects to charging £50 a month for a membership, and it's a night and day difference on the questions that you get and the work involved. It's really interesting. I love both personally, but don't ever be afraid to charge good money because it's actually easier to sell.
I had a coaching client at the back end of last year that I had to get rid of after 3 months, and it was honestly, it was the epitome of the 95/5 rule,
Yeah.
where this guy was probably taking up 95% of my resource, and he was making up 5% of my revenue. And I think I've got pretty good at that now, where I can make these assessments in life and just say, no, that this is really not giving me anything positive, and I need to cut this off. And it's quite often the case where the cheapest, the worst paying clients are the biggest headaches. And it's generally because they haven't got much market sophistication. They haven't got much knowledge. They're coming into things brand new, afresh. And for them, it's you're having to go from here, that's like the basement, all the way to here. Whereas the people here, you're just having to get them there. But that's where the value is. You're giving them that final 20%, which is what matters to them. Jack, I've got a big final question to ask you.
Sure.
And this kind of really wraps into the content club. So let's call you the content man. And it reads as a fellow entrepreneur asked, how would you go about creating content that A, engages people, and B, most importantly, then generates revenue?
That's a huge question. I think because the area of content is so broad, I've been doing it for 10 years. And I still learn new things every day. And also because it changes so quickly. Trends and new tactics are always on the rise, or, whilst new ones are hot and other ones are not, it changes so quickly. From my experience, it just comes down to, and this is kind of why I don't know if it's Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It might be someone else that's right.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. It's why it's such a good book, because content comes down to connecting with people. If you can connect with someone emotionally and tie that up and package that rationally, you will win. That's just how it works. That is the simplest nutshell of how you win with content. Underneath that opens up a plethora of different avenues and things and science and art and technicalities and nitty-gritty details that you need to master to do that. It's why I would presume, take this as a pinch of salt, it's a multi-billion-pound industry. I don't know if that's correct, because it's fucking hard. It's really hard work. But again, it just comes down to finding the root cause of the problem. And people do purchase things emotionally. People buy things irrationally. You just got to tap into people, understand them, understand what their problems are, create content that resonates with them emotionally and rationally. Have a great product, know how to market, know how to position. There's so many other things. And this is also why it's so difficult to pinpoint, because you could do everything right with your content. You could do it to the point that Alex Hormozy or Mr. Beast or KSI or Ali Abdaal does it, right? Absolutely perfected it to the point that they've mastered it. But you still won't convert if your business is crap and if you don't understand the commercials of how to market a product and how to build a business and how to manage a team. You need the art and the science. They need to work together. And I would say that content is really only 50% of the problem. The other 50% is the science and the analytics and the data and the unsexy stuff that people don't want to do. And that's why so few people win, because they approach it with only a 50% mindset. It takes years to do it properly. But that's what I would say. Yeah, connect with people and just figure out a way to add as much value as you possibly can in what you sell. That's what I would say.
I like that. That's very cool. Jack, I've looked into the Content Club, and I think anyone who wants to kind of get a better grasp of content should really check it out. We'll put a link there. But what's in store for you for 2025, and where can people find you?
For me, the next year is a bit of a regrounding year, a bit of a settle year in terms of the last decade really has been absolutely wild. I think this year I'm just spending time on what do I prioritize and what do I really cherish and value out of life. And I think it's putting more of my time and my money into that as opposed to the materialistic arbitrary stuff. I think for me, what does Jack really want out of life? That's what I'm still kind of figuring out a little bit. you can find me on LinkedIn. I make content pretty much every day. I want to throw my hands up and say I was one of the OG video creators on the platform. So there you go.
I'm one of the best, and I'm not blowing smoke up your
I
ass.
appreciate that, man. I
Your
appreciate
content
that.
is solid.
Thank you. And yeah, you can learn about stuff there. I'm not here to sell stuff, but I just wanted to add value, mate. I think I've learned a bit in the 10 years that I've been doing it. If it can help at least one person do something with theirs.
Nice one. Jack, it was a pleasure having you on.
Likewise, man. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome.